Welcome to ChoosingPartnership.com's first special guest interview. I'm excited to introduce Arielle Ford to you. Arielle is a leading personality in the personal growth and contemporary spiritual movement. For the past 25 years, she has been living, teaching, and promoting consciousness through all forms of media. As the president of the Ford Group, Arielle was widely recognized as America's foremost book publicist. She was instrumental in launching the careers of many New York Times best-selling self-help authors, including Deepak Chopra, Jack Canfield, Mark Victor Hansen, Neil Donald Walsh, and Debbie Ford. Arielle is also an author and has written 8 books, including the international bestseller The Soulmate Secret, Manifest the Love of Your Life with the Law of Attraction. She has been called the Cupid of Consciousness and the Fairy Godmother of Love, and believes that, with a simple Wabi Sabi shift in perception, couples can discover the beauty and perfection in themselves and their partners, leading to a deeper, more loving, and more fulfilling relationship. Arielle's newest book is Wabi Sabi Love, the ancient art of finding perfect love in imperfect relationships. She lives in La Jolla, California with her husband and soulmate, Brian Hilliard, and their feline friends. Interviewing Arielle today is Alison Armstrong, CEO of PAX Programs, nationally renowned educator and expert on understanding men, and the creator of Choosing Partnership. Welcome, Arielle and Alison. We are so excited to have you on ChoosingPartnership.com today and can't wait to hear what you have to say.
This is Alison Armstrong, and what you've just heard is the introduction of who Arielle Ford is for the world. And what I want you to know is who she is for me and why I asked her to be the first person, the first special guest for ChoosingPartnership.com. And this is what I'd want you to know about her. She is one of the most down-to-earth people you will ever meet. I have never, ever seen her put on airs. I think she'd probably laugh at people who did. She walks her talk. She's an expert in many fields, and yet not arrogant. She's an amazing learner, amazing listener. She's a great friend, and pretty much from very early on when I met her, she just felt like my sister. Like, oh, this is my sister. And I love being with Arielle, and I love being with Arielle and her husband, Brian. And as someone who normally just likes to be with people one-on-one, they're one of the few couples that I love being with because of the way that they are with each other and the way they play with each other, interact with each other, and be in love with each other and co-create. And that has a lot to do with why I wanted you to be with us today, Arielle, because you practice what you preach and you are what you teach, and I think you provide an amazing access for people, whether it's through Wabi Sabi Love or the Soulmate Secret or just being you.
Thanks for inviting me, because playing with you is just always fun. You're just a wild and crazy girl.
We do have a good time together, and I confessed earlier that I was a little intimidated by doing this because Arielle literally is the architect of my favorite interviews of all time, and she takes such care with them and really creates an experience that's transformational for people. And I don't know if this will be like that, but I know we're going to have fun, and I know I'm going to learn things about you that I don't already know and get to hear you express what it is that you're passionate about contributing to the world of relationships and amazing lives. And so I'm really excited. Thank you.
Yeah, me too. Well, I think it's really just such a blessing that, you know, both of us get to spend our lives talking about love. I mean, who makes a living doing that, right? I mean, it's not only a fun topic, but the more you express love, the more love you get. So it's just like this constant, waterfall of love falling over me. So any opportunity I get to talk more about it is just awesome. So thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so a couple of things I'm curious about. In all the time we spent together, I never got to ask you any of this stuff, so I'm just going to have fun with it. One of them is you're known by many, 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 jillions of people in the world for the Soulmate Secret. And then your latest book is Wabi Sabi Love. And I'm curious about the journey in between one and the other.
Oh, okay. So I manifested my soulmate at the age of 43. I was a first-time bride at 43.
That's awesome.
And I quickly became the poster child for women over 40. And every time I would meet a single woman over 40, she'd pull me aside and whisper in my ear, "How do I get a Brian?" And I, shared this story about how I manifested him using law of attraction techniques. And that sort of blossomed into an online product, which became a book, which became, online courses and weekend workshops. But then I started having all my married friends pull me aside and say, "Well, it's nice that you wrote that book for single people, but how do I turn my mate into my soulmate?" And, I'm not a therapist or a coach. I didn't study any of this. I just wrote the Soulmate Secret out of my personal experience. So I started sitting with this question: how do you turn your mate into your soulmate? And I had no idea. I was like, I don't know. How do you do that? So I decided to reverse engineer my relationship with Brian.
It's one of my favorite things to do. This makes me happy.
Yeah, I'd never done it before. I thought, well, how or why does this work? So I went back to the beginning of our relationship, and it was really kind of messy because by the time we actually got married, I was 44. So I spent 44 years alone running my life, and what I was really good at was being the boss. I had this business, and I was used to telling people what to do, but I didn't know how to be a partner. Mm-hmm. And Brian did. He had been married once before, plus he'd played professional sports and college sports his whole life, so he knew all about being a team player. So I had to learn fast. And one of the things that I had used in my personal life that I decided to apply to trying to be a good partner was this ancient Japanese aesthetic called Wabi Sabi. And Wabi Sabi looks at and honors all things old, worn, weathered, imperfect, and impermanent. And it seeks to find beauty and perfection in imperfection. So what the Japanese would do is they would find, let's say, a big Ming vase that might have a crooked crack down the middle of it, and rather than call it an ugly broken vase, they would place it on a pedestal and shine a spotlight on the crack. So it's all about honoring the beauty and perfection and imperfection. So when I first learned this concept 30 years ago, I started to apply it to myself because back then I was a perfectionist. And I found that life was more easy and more fun when I could laugh at my imperfections, knowing I would never, ever be perfect. So when we got, here I was in this new marriage, and I knew I wasn't perfect, and I was starting to find out this fantasy that my soulmate wasn't perfect. I started to think about, well, how does Wabi Sabi apply to this? How could we get through these things in a Wabi Sabi way? But I wasn't actually calling it then, but that's what I was thinking. So I'll give you an example of one of the first things that happened. One day I found myself standing in front of Brian, and I had my left hand on my left hip, and my right index finger was quickly wagging in front of his face. And I was carrying, you get the picture? I was just carrying on about God knows what. Yes. I don't know what I was raving about. But I caught myself, and I was really sort of humiliated and appalled at my behavior. I was like, oh, my God, when did I become that woman? And I stopped. And I said to Brian, I said, the next time this happens, and unfortunately I'm pretty sure there's going to be a next time, could you just kindly, sweetly, gently say to me, when did Sheila enter the room? Now, Sheila is my mother's name, and I love and adore and worship my mother, but she can be a bit overbearing and bossy, as can I. And Brian was so cool about it. He instantly got it, and he said, yes, and when I get too patronizing or I'm up on my soapbox, you can just call me Wayne. That was his father's name. So in this Wabi Sabi instant, we came up with these code names to avoid World War III. And to this day, we still use them. I mean, it's not as often,
yes.
but that's, so I started to look and see, oh, that's how we make it work. We rewrite the story of what we think is going on. And I saw that, Brian wasn't waking up in the morning thinking, how can I drive Arielle crazy today? That
right.
was never a conscious thought. And yet he would do stuff that would make me crazy. And I noticed that as much as I would bitch, moan, complain, and whine about whatever I thought he was doing, nothing ever changed. And I realized that's because I was trying to make him change. What needed to change was me. I needed to change my story about what was happening. Now, this doesn't work in cases of abuse or addiction or bad behavior, but it does work really well on everyday annoyances. So I'll tell you a quick story of an everyday annoyance. So when it comes to...
Wait, before you go there, can we pause right there for a second?
Sure.
So I want to tie some things together with sort of the background of what most of the people listening to you have from their work with PACS.
Okay, good.
Okay, because I think it'll just really, really make a difference.
Yeah.
And that is we have something that we call her the ideal woman. And it's something that we noticed a long, long time ago that every woman has, sometimes it's more than one voice, but a voice in her head of the perfect woman. And she really is perfect. That's the definition of ideal. It means of a perfect kind. And so she's the perfect woman who's the right amount of the right quality at the right time. And she's convinced that that's how you survive, how you succeed, and literally your survival is dependent upon being perfect. So this voice really thinks she's looking out for you by pointing out to you everything that's wrong so that you can fix it and be perfect, and then everything will turn out. And so it was interesting when you started talking about discovering Wabi Sabi and applying it to accepting things about yourself, that your own imperfections, right? Wabi Sabi. And it ties into an event that we did where we asked men to express to us what was the relationship between perfection and beauty. Now, in the voice in our head, one equals the other. Perfection equals beauty, right? And that's how, we'll buy makeup that says that our skin will be flawless. Mm-hmm. That's all it has to say is flawless. You'll be flawless. And so man after man after man came to the microphone talking about how there was no relationship between perfection and beauty, and giving example after example of where they thought that the very thing that their wife or girlfriend thought was imperfect about them, that for them, that very same characteristic was what made them beautiful.
I so get that.
Yeah,
totally
yeah. So I just think it's interesting, and I love the term Wabi Sabi. And if I can tell you a really quick story, and then I'll let you go back to what you were going to say. So, we had this huge disaster in our house in Colorado, and a pipe broke in a freeze, and it flooded everything. And as a result of it, I got to remodel my kitchen. And And so I got to order exactly the countertops I wanted for my kitchen. And I was, very conscientious about it, and I found this green material that's made from glass at the end of its recyclable, lifetime, and it's made out of corn resin. So I, feel like I was supporting the subsidized farmers. and it's this green material, right? And I'm all excited about it, and it's very muted, but it's perfect to disguise crumbs. It's, got these sparkly flecks, and it's tan and white and various stages of beige and taupe and stuff like that. And, and I just have stretch after stretch expanses of all this countertop that I get to cook and do all my stuff on. And here I am, wiping them down and cleaning them and polishing them, and oh my gosh, there's a red fleck and there's an orange fleck. And then there's these two places that it looks like somebody smashed a fly. It's black as can be, and it looks like, the smear of a fly. And, these things are really small. It's like, you have to take the end of your little finger, right? But I see them, and my mind just is outraged. What is this red and this orange and these, dead flies doing in my countertop? And it's funny because it doesn't ever stop being outraged by it. That same voice, that expects my countertops to be expensive. After all, given what I paid for them, they should be perfect, right? But you save me every time, because my mind will go, and I'll go, Wabi Sabi.
That's so funny. Well, I believe the word perfection needs to be changed to pure fiction.
That's great. Pure fiction.
Yeah,
exactly. Never seen.
Yeah, pure fiction. And the truth is, if somebody was perfect, we would so resent them. We don't want to be with anybody who's perfect, because we know we're never going to be perfect. So the last thing we want is somebody to be perfect. And it's true, the things that we most love about our friends and family and spouses is all their quirky weirdness.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's what we're most going to miss. Even if it pisses us off, we're going to miss it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thanks for sharing all that. I so get that. Yeah, this whole perfection thing is just such a myth. The first day that I learned about Wabi Sabi, I was reading this art trade magazine, and there was this big article, and as I was reading it, I happened to look down at my skirt, and there was this big spaghetti stain from where I had dropped my lunch in my lap. And this wasn't the first time I'd ever done that. And I decided, well, if I were going to be a Wabi Sabi artisan, what would this spaghetti stain mean? And I decided that rather than it means I'm just a slob, it means that I have this huge appetite for life and for food. And if you want to hang out with me, you better get used to my food ending up on my lap and yours. Which was so freeing, because then if I needed to, if anybody was going to see me, I would just point out the stain. It's like, look what I did at lunch today. Aren't I fun to eat with? And so that's how I started to get over my own perfectionism. Because I was, I didn't have panic attacks over it, but I was anxious. I didn't want to make any mistakes. I always wanted to be perfect. I wanted to show up a certain way. And as soon as my brain shifted into, I could just be Wabi Sabi, life got easier. So I just want to quickly tell you this toothpaste story because it's so funny.
Please.
So I'm a bottom of the tube squeezer, and I like it really neat, and I like to roll it up and get every last bit of toothpaste out of it. But I married a guy who's a mangled from the middle squeezer. And
yep.
You know the type, right? So
you duplicate couple over here in this household,
right? Mm-hmm. And then it doesn't put the top back on either. So for a couple of years, every time I'd go into the bathroom and I would see this mangled tube of toothpaste, I would literally get this bad feeling in the pit of my stomach and have this negative thought. Why can't he just do it right?
Mm.
And I noticed that whenever I tried to talk to him about it, he would look at me as if I were absolutely insane.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So I stopped asking him to do it my way. And then I would have thoughts, well, maybe we should have 2 tubes of toothpaste. That way I can have mine and he can have his. But I realized I would see his on the counter and it would still bother me. Now, this went on for years. I know it sounds like a stupid little thing, but I literally had a physical reaction seeing the toothpaste like this. It bothered me. And I made him wrong in my mind. So one day I took the tube of toothpaste, the mangled tube of toothpaste, and I held it in the palm of my hand, and I stared at it, and I just kept saying to myself, what is good about this? What is good? Dear God, please show me what is good about this. And then it came to me. In this flash of brilliance, I got, thank God I married a man who brushes his teeth. And now, every day when I see the tube of toothpaste like that, my heart expands with gratitude because I live with a guy who cares enough about his hygiene to brush his teeth. So that's a Wabi Sabi shift in perception. It's what I call going from annoyed to enjoyed.
Annoyed from enjoyed. That's a great way to put it. And what I love about it is, the way that we would talk about it is, for human, animal, and for the ideal woman, there's a right, wrong world, and it just is right, and it just is wrong, and why can't they do it right, and don't they care enough to do it right? Yeah. But if you think about it, we didn't get to decide what was right.
Exactly.
We didn't invent that was right. It just seems right. So we're no more in charge of how we do it, right? Like we have no more freedom to roll up or not roll up the toothpaste. We're compelled. We have to do it a certain way. That's right. And so much for free will, right? It's like, there's no free will. No. There's how the toothpaste, is supposed to be. And inventing your own interpretation for something, one of the most, I think, practical and powerful expressions of free will, that you get to decide what it means instead of something else did.
Yeah, I totally agree.
It's great.
And the opposite thing for Brian was, I lived alone for 43 plus years. So I would have my cup of tea in the morning, and then I would put my teacup in the sink, and someday it would get into the dishwasher, and I'd make my toast in the morning, and I wouldn't think about it. Well, soon after Brian moved in with me, he would always say to me, why do you leave your cup in the sink? Can't you just put it in the dishwasher? And I'm thinking, it'll get there someday. Or he'd say to me, how come you always leave crumbs around the toaster? It's like, what crumbs? I do. This went on for about 6 months, and it got to the point where every time I saw him headed towards the kitchen, I'd sort of brace myself. Oh, what did I do wrong now? And then one day he said the craziest thing to me. He said, I figured something out. He said, when it comes to leaving your cup in the sink and crumbs around the toaster, you just have a blind spot. And since I'm the one it bothers, I'm just going to clean up after you. And I thought, that is so brilliant, because I'm not thinking about the cup or the crumbs, but he is. It's really his problem, not mine. Yes. So he cleans up after me. And, so we do this in a million different ways. Like, Brian's never seen a TV that he didn't want on really loud. And I'm really sensitive to noise and light. So unless I'm watching the TV, I don't want it on. And I came home one day, and we have 4 televisions, and all 4 of them were on really loud, and he wasn't even home. and then I saw the remote sitting there. And I was like, oh, this is why God invented remote controls. I can just go around turning them off. which is what I still do, because for as many times as I said, well, if you're leaving the house, just turn the TV off, he never does. And then when he leaves a room, if he's watching TV, I surreptitiously make it lower because I can't stand it loud. These are just little wabi-sabi things you can do to make life easier for yourself, because chances are they're not really going to change.
Okay, so I gotta interject here. So there's several things that I'm really finding delightful about this conversation. One of them is I'm the only person until now that I knew who would say things like, that's why God invented remote controls. I mean, I've been saying this. That's why God invented cell phones, right? So that he can call you from the grocery store and make sure that he got the right kind of tomato paste. Or that's why God made Ziploc baggies. And then God made... And people look at me like I am off my rocker. What did God have to do with a remote control? And to me, it's obvious.
Oh, it's so obvious. I don't think there's any reason to question it.
Exactly. So I just been rejoicing in hearing you say that. I got the biggest tickle out of it. And again, I just hope people are listening who know that here are two people we just had this resonance and this alignment, and then we've had these, deep, intense conversations about stuff, and I've stayed at your house and been around you and Brian, but we haven't talked about things like, crumbs and coffee cups, and, amongst our graduates, crumbs are famous, that I would get a countertop that would help conceal crumbs. Many people don't understand why, because I'm the Brian in that case, right? I'm the one that's driven crazy by the crumbs. And also for so long we've taught, don't make somebody else accountable for what's important to you, because they probably don't even see it. Greg doesn't see dust, and he doesn't see crumbs. So putting him in charge of those things is just foolish, right? And so what Brian was saying about, you just don't see that stuff, and it bugs me, so I'll be in charge of it. And Greg's been ever since we moved to Colorado, he's been making me breakfast every morning, but he's also been trying not to upset me about the kitchen not being clean, so he's trying to clean up while making breakfast, and he just got totally upset one day. And I'm so grateful for him to make me breakfast, right? I'm like, how about we make a new deal? You make breakfast, I'll clean up. He's like, really? You would do that? Now, this is one of the oldest trades in human history, right? One person cooks and the other cleans. But to him, it was the most novel idea, And then there's what you just said about the toothpaste. So I was thinking about, we have rechargeable toothbrushes, right? And Greg brushes his teeth and immediately puts it back on the charger. And I get upset, right? And I did last night, about what accumulates on the charger from the dripping down of the toothbrush, right? And it's just like, it's just wrong. That's just wrong, right? And then as you were talking about the toothpaste, and thank God you married somebody who brushes their teeth, I was thinking, okay, so how can I interpret that? And I thought, I can interpret he is so excited to crawl in bed and snuggle with me that he doesn't want to waste any time doing what I do with my toothpaste.
Much better,
of washing it off and clean, right? Or you know what? I could trade him cleaning his toothbrush, after he uses it each time. Or what I do get, which is this most amazing thing, he crawls in bed and warms up my side. Right?
And who doesn't want that?
I'm like, hello, it's 20-something degrees out right now when we go to bed. He warms up my side. So, how about he keeps doing that and I'll be in charge of cleaning toothbrushes? Because I'm the one that it bugs. Yeah. And I just, who would think Alison Armstrong and Arielle Ford would get on the phone and talk about toothbrushes? But it's so life, and it's this thing that I've been saying for so long about, love is really strong. It's really resilient. Being in love is like a soap bubble.
Right.
And in these interpretations, these ways of interacting with the imperfection, with someone else having a different way of doing things, of someone not even noticing anything, and the way that you interpret it, they're all ways of preserving the in-love bubble. And everyone knows when you're in love, it transforms all of life.
Yeah. And there's now a scientific study that proves that what we're talking about works. There was a psychologist at the University of Buffalo named Dr. Sandra Murray who did this study on couples who wear rose-colored glasses and idealize their partner. And she discovered that doing that leads to more happiness and satisfaction in the relationship because they're focused on what's right and not on what's wrong in the relationship. So they also call it the Pygmalion Effect, which is the phenomenon in which the greater the expectation placed upon someone, the better they perform. Or you and I would probably call it a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
So, if we're going to be emotionally mature adults and we're going to get to choose, which we do, choose our thoughts and feelings and beliefs, why wouldn't we intentionally choose to wear rose-colored glasses?
Yeah, and I love what you're saying, and another way to put it might be, what if that is love?
Yeah.
What if loving your partner isn't this feeling you have in your chest? Do you know, what if love is the action of choosing the interpretation that loves and accepts them?
I totally believe that, because we know that the whole falling in love, being in love, brain chemistry cocktail is really just an socially acceptable form of insanity. It's not really what love is. For me, love is really a behavior.
Right.
It's really actions and choices that we make and devotion.
Yes.
And you do something based on your commitment to love. I know one of the first big decisions Brian and I ever made was to decide that our choices would be made out of what would most serve our relationship. So it wouldn't be what does Arielle want or what does Brian want, but what will most serve the relationship. And that makes everything so much easier because it's usually pretty obvious what's going to serve the relationship.
Could we talk about that?
Yeah.
Because, there's something you said before. You used the word devotion, and it ties in with this because someone once deconstructed the word devotion from devote. In other words, not voting anymore. Not voting moment by moment, yes, no, in, out, good, bad. You're not voting. You're all in.
All in.
And, and then you talked about this choice, what's best for the relationship. And I think marriages were a heck of a lot simpler when they were mostly economic. They were either chemistry-based or economic arrangements, and they were about a legacy of the children having a better life than their parents did. And that they were much, much simpler. And then we added this notion that we should be happy. Do you know? And that when we added the notion we should be happy, it became about 1,000 times more complex. And it might, for most people, have made marriage, as in a lifetime commitment, an unreasonable expectation. Because what you were just referring to, Arielle, is if you're actually going to fulfill marriage vows, you have to keep making the choice that empowers the relationship.
Yep.
If you're making any other choice, you're going to, they call it grow apart. It's not grow apart, it's choose apart. It's become apart one choice at a time. one choice of what works for me, but not for us. And I think that's one of the hardest things for individuals to wrap their heads around. You used the word team at the beginning of the conversation. Wrap their heads around a union. That to actually have a union, you have to keep choosing union. And it's not, it's not always an easy thing to do. And we were talking about, in these daily life things of crumbs and toothpaste, that you're choosing union. But it also shows up in big parts of life. Like, there was a time when I realized that my relationship with money was entirely based on fear. And I had to transform it. It's like, I had to. And in the middle of transforming it, it activated Greg's fear. And he just dug in. It's just like, he just dug in. No, I'm not going there. I'm not going there. I've always just wanted to be comfortable. I want to be comfortable. That's what I care about, is being comfortable. And there was this impasse where I had to go. I had to move in this direction away from fear. And I could have just gone. I could have just gone without him. But I didn't. I stayed with him, and I just kept saying, I have to go. And you have to come with me. Because I knew that was what was best for the relationship, right? Was to move away from this relationship to money that was so disempowering, right? But I couldn't do it on my own. He had to come with me. And I just kept saying, I have to go and you have to come with me. And he was just like, his eyes were practically crossed. He was so confronted. And he'd be like, blah, 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 blah. And I go, okay. And I have to go and you have to come with me. Until, it was probably 2 hours later when his eyes cleared and he's worked his way through it, and he said, I don't know how and I don't know what it's going to take, but I'm coming with you.
Awesome.
Yes. And it's just, so I would love if you would say more about that. Do you know about those choices in...
Well, I'll tell you a story Harville Hendricks shared with me.
Okay.
That was so cute because he likes to talk about, the purpose of creative tension in a relationship and how he doesn't believe in compromise. Compromise is not part of the conversation. And I said, well, give me an example from your own life. He said, I got the best example. He said, my idea of a perfect day is to wake up in the morning, get behind the wheel of a vehicle, point it in a direction, and drive for 9 hours. That's my perfect day. He said, my wife, Helen, her perfect day is to sit in her most comfortable chair in the living room and do needlepoint or crochet all day. And if she has to leave the house, if she has to, she wants to know where she's going, for how long, and when she'll be back. I said, well, that sounds like quite a pickle. He said, oh, no, it's great. He goes, we bought an RV. I'm always driving, and she's always at home. So it's the perfect solution. She's in her living room in the RV. He's on the road, and nobody compromised. Everybody won. But it takes a little bit of thinking, And on the devotion part, because I think that's a part that's missing for so many people. My friend Max once told me that the way she manifested her husband was that she said the same prayer every day, and her prayer was, Dear God, I want to make somebody as happy as I would like to be. And within days, she ended up manifesting this man. And in the middle of their first conversation, he said, well, my lifelong goal is to make somebody as happy as I would like to be. They knew they were meant for each other. And they've now been together 20 years because really we all just want to be loved. And if you're going to make a commitment to somebody, then you need to love them and love yourself and be willing to do what it takes to keep the love alive. And some days are going to be better than others. And there will be days when you hate your partner, and that's why I think it's really important that we all have our own emotional toolkits to deal with. They're not there to fix you. You need to fix yourself. I do tapping. I do the Sedona method. I do the heart math, heart lock-ins. I realize when I get triggered, it looks like the problem's sitting across the couch from me, but I realize it's me, and we do what we need to do, and we get through conflicts really, really quickly now. And, I think I shared with you last time we talked about the big, big conversation Brian had with me 6 months ago where he sat me down and said, we have to talk. And I was like, oh, my God, And he said, he got tears in his eyes. He said, I'm really afraid you're going to get very, very sick. He said, you need to stop working. You're working too hard. You need rest. You're completely burnt out. You've hit a wall, and I'm scared. I'm really scared. I can't lose you. And it changed my whole life. The things that happened after that, I did stop working. I stopped for 107 days. I just started up again. But my life is now going to be completely different because he was willing to be honest, transparent, vulnerable, just completely cards on the table about what was true for him. And normally I would have gotten defensive and argued with him. Oh, no, I can power through this. But just being able to see in his eyes that, this was no kidding, I got that I had to trust him and I needed to take care of myself.
So I'd like to talk about this. We're going to talk about your sabbatical on our fireside chat, and I'm really excited about that. But I'd like to talk about this sort of in just a little bit like the bigger context of it. And you used the term earlier, blind spots. And I love that idea. I love that distinction. I've been working on it for a while now of maybe our blind spots are right next to our brilliance. And that's where they're so hard to see because they're often even in the same area of what we're brilliant at. And I'm just curious, I think, again, it has goes back to this idea of perfection where we'll pick someone because of what we admire about them, and then we'll criticize them for the ways that they're not like us without really examining, could they be the way that we admire and be like us? Can those two things go together? And instead of maybe what I love about him makes it impossible for him to be like me as well. Maybe they're mutually exclusive. And so I love the idea of as couples that instead of criticizing or taking the other person out for their weaknesses, their blind spots, their challenges, what if we knew and what if we chose that's how it's supposed to work, that's how we're supposed to fill in for each other. And for example, I'm this Miss Possibility, right? You could, and I'm an engineer, right? I'm a builder and I'm an engineer and I create solutions and I design things. And so you could say something to me and my mind would instantly produce anywhere from 3 to 10 different ways that could be done. And it just does that, right? And Greg, on the other hand, we started using the term one way, Mr. One Way. And because his mind just comes up with one way to do something, and then it's the only way to do it. And if he can't see how to do it, even though it's the only way to do it, then it can't be done. And he just instantly goes to, it can't be done. And we've been together for 22 years, and we just distinguished this in the last 3 months. But it's exciting because now, he's actually generated, hi, Mr. One Way here. Could you help me?
Well,
right?
That's just a fun Wabi Sabi way to play with it,
Yes. Yeah. Yes, and it's fun what you brought up earlier, like Sheila and Wayne. It's fun to name it because then it externalizes it, and it's not something wrong with you. It's like this other character. Now, on the other hand, I can't tell you how many times he's told me you're trying to put 10 pounds in a 3-pound bag. Because not only do I come up with 10 different ways to do something, I try to do them all. Right? And so he's the guy who's always grounding it in reality. Do you know how much time something actually takes? How much energy a person actually has? How much capacity they actually have? And I just keep wondering, what would be possible if we actually did a kind of inventory of compliments? How are we different? Almost like if I made a list of all of my strengths and all of what I would consider my weaknesses or my challenges, and my partner, whether this is a romantic partner or a business partner, it's smart too, all of their strengths and all of their weaknesses, and then we played a game of mix and match. Do you know where you actually draw lines from one to another, just like you did in school when you had to, green goes with frog and brown goes with horse, right? And actually notice, wow, isn't this great how we can fill in for each other, how we can see what the other person can't see. So I'm just curious what else you would have to say about that, especially in relationship with Brian. What do you know that you contribute to him? And what else does he contribute to you?
Well, I think what I contribute to him is on the level of, fun and adventure and exploring the world in a very grounded way. And for me, he just leads by example. So he's this, he wakes up happy, he smiles in his sleep. His whole reason for being is to make sure everybody he comes in contact with has the experience of being loved. I never see him stressed out. He doesn't worry about things. He's totally trusting and knowing that he's fully loved and supported by the universe, and good things are always happening for him. So for as long as I've known him, he's kind of been my role model. I want to be more like him. Now, it's taken me more than 16 years to finally start living more his lifestyle, because I was so stuck in having to accomplish, work, do. And he's all about being, knowing and trusting how supported he is. So for me, I think I really got the prize.
Wow. And he takes care of the crumbs and the coffee cups.
Yeah.
And you turn down the TV.
Yeah, he listens to it too loud anyway, but when I need to make decisions, he's the first one I go to, because I totally trust his opinion to know what's right for me, for him, for us, and also I trust his intuition. So I watch his responses to things. But when we first got together, I didn't know any of that. This is like growing over time. I think the most miraculous and surprising thing about being married to Brian is that he gets more interesting to me every day. I thought at this point I would be a little bored, and I'm never bored. He's just fascinating. Wow. I learn new stuff all the time about him.
Well, let's talk about that, because I think that even is a Wabi Sabi quality. I would use the word curiosity. They say curiosity kills the cat. I think a lack of curiosity kills love, kills relationships.
There's a lot of sayings out there that just are bullshit. Can I say that? It's like the one that we each only get one big love in a lifetime, there's
I don't believe
all
that
these
at all.
sayings. None of them are true, but people live as if they're true. I was living as if, well, the longer you know somebody, the better you know them, therefore it's going to get old and boring. Not true.
Not true.
And I am curious. I'm very curious about lots of things. Not lots of people, but I'm very curious about Brian,
Yes.
And so I want to understand why he's thinking things, or what's motivating him, or why he does certain things, or why he's drawn to certain people. what he finds interesting about them.
Yes.
So I think that's a good thing. But I never really thought about it as a Wabi Sabi thing. But
well, it's kind of, if Wabi Sabi is seeing the beauty in imperfection, maybe it's also that you're continuing to look for the beauty through change, through time, through aging, through transformation. What's the beauty now? What's the beauty of my partner today?
Last time I interviewed you for something, you said to go and ask Brian what of my curves he really liked.
What's his favorite curve?
Oh, my God, he had a whole list of them. I was so surprised. I thought he'd just give me one of those, what are you asking me about, looks.
Yes.
And instantly, it's like, the curve between your waist and your hips and the back of your calf. And it was wonderful. What a great question. That Alison, she's so smart.
Well, somebody many, many years ago, what a gift he was. His name is Tom Solomon. And it was just this sidebar conversation we had. We were at a transformational program for the weekend, and it was a lunch break, and he took me to the racetrack to bet on the horses. Talk about something that was just like, what? And he gave me the money to bet, and I won. And I got to go buy a new pair of shoes, which, I was poor as a church mouse at the time. So it was quite thrilling. But even better than all that was this other gift he gave me, which was he said, what a person can handle depends on their capacities. And I said, okay, well, what determines their capacities? And he said, well, naturally, the questions they live in. I was like, the questions they live in? What do you mean? And he said, well, unfortunately, most of humanity lives in questions like, is it Friday yet?
What's for dinner?
Does he like me? Am I loved? The human instinct question for women is, am I safe? In the questions that we live in, they literally determine our lives. They determine our worlds. So ever since then, and that was ages ago. That was before I met Greg. That was, wow. That was before I started studying men or anything. So we're talking like 1989 or something like that. And that's when I started paying attention to the questions. That the questions are probably a lot more important than the answers. And if you think about, asking Brian the question, what are your favorite curves on my body? You now have these answers. But more important than that, you have the memory of the look on his face being in that question, right? There's nothing like the look they get on their face. You get to find out how enchanting our curves are. And, what if there's a good reason for that is one of my favorite questions. What if men are responding to women? What's my part? That's one of my new favorite questions. What's my part? This goes back to the 10 pounds into the 3-pound bag. I used to think everything that didn't work in the world was my job. And I was killing myself, and I was always looking for a trim tab. How could I make the biggest difference with the least amount of energy and get to the source of it, and what's the source of it, and what's the source of it? But still, it was all my job. And lately, my question is that my part? What's my part? What's my part? And realizing that by me paying attention to my part, I'm not picking up other people's parts and therefore depriving them of their contribution.
Yeah,
their
you don't have to be
brilliance.
General Manager of the universe. That's exhausting.
Oh my God, and I was exhausted. And now, I have this thing in the middle of my day. It's called horseplay. I'll take 2 hours and go ride horses. I have at my access
I know,
about
talk to them too.
and
So they
talk to
you.
them and play with them. And then this morning, I've been struggling ever since I moved to Colorado with walking. I used to walk every day, or 4 or 5 days a week, and I just stopped walking. And then I've been upset because I look out my window at my horse, who I don't ride her, I ride other horses, and I just been bummed I haven't spent enough time with Hallelujah. And I woke up this morning, and suddenly my brain said, well, what if you walked Hallelujah? And suddenly it was worth doing. But anyhow, the point is just the questions we ask. You know, what are the question you're living into? How can I contribute? You know, how can I contribute? Are they getting it? Is this making a difference? Versus, am I doing it right? Do they like me? Am I succeeding? I mean, those questions all create different capacities.
Yeah. I like that.
I like as a new question, you know, how could I Wabi Sabi this? What if I apply that to everything that was frustrating or annoying me or setting off the perfectionist in my head? Okay, well, how can I Wabi Sabi this?
Yeah, and it's a fun creative process to do because it literally does require some creativity.
Wow. Okay, well, I think we're coming to the end of our time for this conversation. So couple things to ask you.
Sure.
So people want more of you, which they would be silly to not. Where can they find you? What are you working on? Where would you send them to participate with you?
Yeah, a couple things. Well, if they're interested in manifesting a soulmate, SoulmateSecret.com. I've got a weekly newsletter that goes out with information on how to do that. And there's a tab on that site called Free Stuff, where there's lots of free goodies to get. And then whenever I do have workshops or online courses coming up, I let people on my list know about that.
So
also,
that's SoulmateSecret.com.
SoulmateSecret.com, yeah.
Okay.
And then for Wabi Sabi stuff, I have a site called WabiSabiLove.com, and it's WabiSabi Love.com. And if you go to WabiSabiLove.com/gifts, GIFTS, gifts, you have to type the whole thing in. I have a free 5-part video series on how to incorporate Wabi Sabi.
Okay, you guys got to remember that whole extension, WabiSabiLove.com/gifts.
Yeah.
Presents.
Yeah.
Yay.
Goodies.
Okay.
Goodies, yeah. So there's all kinds of good stuff there. So those are 2 easy ways. And I'm also on Facebook, Facebook.com/Soulmate Secret. That's another way to find me. So that's pretty much where I'm at. And, I'll be bopping around speaking at different events this year. There's an event called Celebrate Your Life in Phoenix around Valentine's Day. Brian and I will both be speaking there. And I'll be doing my Soulmate Secret workshop at Omega at the end of May. So I have a few things coming up next year. But mostly I'm going to be dedicated to having fun and nothing but fun.
That's awesome. Well, thank you. This is certainly fun.
Oh, thank you. I love talking to you, Alison.
Yeah, me too. And thanks for being my very first. I'm not a virgin anymore.
No, you handle this like a total pro. I would have never known this was your first time.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.
We hope you've enjoyed this audio recording brought to you by Alison Armstrong's library, found at choosingpartnership.com. All material found in these recordings is copyrighted. You are free to download and listen to them. However, you may not repackage, reformat, resell, or share these files in any way. Thank you.